What does masturbation, teenage brides, and guaranteeing eternal salvation for all of your family have to do with obedience? In this episode, we are going to talk about the Mormon church and its constant attempts at controlling its members. Hi, I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon church, and this is what I did after leaving.
And I'm Di Beals. I'm a pastor at Venture Church in Washington State. I'm your friend along for the ride, really along for the ride after that lead in.
All right. Well, let's get into this episode. I am really excited about this because I get to talk about my mission. Oh my gosh. And I have so many mixed feelings about my mission. For those of you who listen to our channel a lot, you'll know that I grew up in the church. I served a mission. I did all of the Mormon-ese things and have left. And I'm on a different path. But my mission, I remember being in the MTC. Di, do you remember the Missionary Training Center?
Yep. I was just going to say that. I knew what that stood for. I've learned.
Yes, we're making progress. So I was at the Missionary Training Center. And I remember I was there for I was there for maybe a week, and I was starting to get pretty homesick, right? I'd never really been away from home. I was starting to get pretty homesick, and I remember sitting down. I couldn't be like, hey, Dad, I'm going to call you. We couldn't do that back then. I remember sitting down and starting to write letters back home. Oh. And this was on like a Thursday, and I remember sitting down.
You wrote letters.
Isn't that funny to think about? So I remember writing these letters, and my mission president comes in. Okay. And this is on like a Thursday, and I'm writing letters, and I'm writing to my parents, and I'm writing to my girlfriend at the time who became my wife. And the mission president comes in, and he says, Elder Van Leuven. You know, he has to have a real dignified voice. Elder Van Leuven, what are you doing? I said, man, I was just feeling like homesick, and I wanted to write home. And he's like, it's a Thursday. You can only write home on mission prep day, which would be a Monday. So I am like sitting there, and I'm like trying to not cry.
Right? Did you know this rule? Was this rule well known?
Oh, Di, there are a lot of rules. I probably did not know the rule at the time because I was only a week into the mission. It's like 100-page rule book that you learn over the mission.
Okay.
But he turned to me and he said, Elder Van Leuven, the first 3 rules of being a missionary are obedience, obedience, obedience. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I
boot
guess
camp. You were
I
at boot
just
camp.
Yeah,
Drop and give me 100 push-ups.
Yeah, I guess I just learned the first 3 rules. So I think that these environments are really hard for people like me. I was always kind of a nonconformist. I had long hair down to my shoulders in high school. I had, scruffy beard. I had Pink Floyd shirt, still the greatest band of all time, right? I was just kind of a different character. And so this hardcore conformity environment was super new for me and something that I wasn't really used to. But you don't know anyone here in the MTC. Like, you didn't come with any friends. You don't know anyone there. And so I think it is a breeding ground for control. Like, it's just a breeding ground for people to be told what to do and to conform. Okay. And this kind of takes me to the mission. The mission is very corporate. And what I mean by corporate is they will roll out like a corporate initiative, what I would consider a corporate initiative. Like, this, for this next 6 weeks, which would be a transfer, we are all going to pray and live in the Spirit. Okay. And then they would talk about that for 6 weeks of what that meant. And everyone would go around and say, I know that as we pray and live in the spirit, we will be effective missionaries. And it's very like echo chambery, right? During these 6 weeks. And that leads me into my masturbation proclamation story. Okay. So Di, I am out on a mission with 19 to 21-year-old men, and it was predominantly men at that time. There was probably a handful.
Women are allowed?
Women are allowed, but there's a handful of sister missionaries back then. Now it's more common, but back then, maybe we had 10 sets of girl missionaries, sisters.
Okay.
But predominantly it's men, okay? What would it be? 100 men to 10 sisters? So yeah, 10%. And so when you have a new missionary come out, they're called a greenie. They're called, they're brand new. They're a green missionary. Okay. We had 2 new ones coming into our area, and we had the masturbation proclamation that came out. And this is what it said.
Wait, is that what it's actually titled?
Di, let me get to the story.
Okay.
It was that too many missionaries were not being missionaries 24 hours a day. There were times in their, personal life where they were, giving up to sin, let's say.
Okay.
And so they needed to be reminded that for 24 hours a day that they were missionaries. Okay. Mm-hmm. That was the corporate, initiative that went
company
out.
Company
line that came out. So we have 2 greenies, and I'm the district leader in this group. We have 2 greenies that come out, 2 brand new missionaries, never, been out on a mission, and then they usually get trained. Okay. I'm the district leader when this initiative comes out. So part of it is that you have to stay dressed in missionary clothes. So I'm talking white shirt, tie,
dark slacks
for 24 hours.
Do you have to have your name tag on the whole time too?
Name tag on.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And you have to sleep in this.
Stop.
Yeah. It's not just that you could take time off and die. I don't know if you've ever slept in a tie before.
I haven't actually.
Very uncomfortable. Okay, but the stuff women wear, all of it looks uncomfortable. All of it looks like I'll never wear that.
No, women live in athletic wear.
Well, that's true.
Athleisure has taken off.
Which is like a nice looking version of sweatpants, I would think.
Yep.
Okay. So anyways, for 24 hours a day, you have to wear this. And the most important part, Di, you always have to wear a belt. Oh. Remember, we're talking about masturbation here. So that was the initiative. When you didn't laugh, I was like, oh my gosh.
It's a strange sentence to put together, but okay.
Okay, so that was the masturbation proclamation. Okay. And this went on.
Okay, let me just clarify. This went on for 2 weeks is about what you're going to say? 2 weeks or your whole mission? 2 years?
No, not this is a corporate initiative. Di, stick with me on the story here.
This is to prevent masturbation.
This is to prevent masturbation. So we are
you have to have a belt on?
You got to keep the belt on. The belt, most important part. Are you ready for this, Di?
I don't think so.
I was the district leader. Okay.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds like you have responsibility
you
don't
want.
I was
over 8 missionaries. Okay. 8 missionaries. Not a lot. These greens come in. We're they're following it to a T. Okay. They're following these rules. In district meeting, I stand up and I'm like, how are we doing with this, guys? And people are like, oh, we're doing good. I'm staying dressed the whole time. And I'm like, all right, This is the whole thing, Di. It was all made up. It was all just a prank that we pulled on these brand new guys that were on the mission.
That's actually pretty good.
It wasn't real. It
Okay. All right.
wasn't, it wasn't the masturbation proclamation. It was
Okay.
literally something that we made up.
Okay. That's a good one. Good job. I give you props for that prank.
Yeah.
That's a well done
So,
prank.
yeah. So these guys who had been sleeping in a white shirt and tie with a belt,
Yep.
were like super ticked off when we told them that it was just a prank. Like we were just messing around with you guys. But I think it actually highlights kind of this broader theme of like how you have me and the MTC with obedience, elder, obedience. And then you have out in the field, like there is this ability for people to be taken advantage of and to really lose their identity and their sense of, I don't know,
Self. Yeah.
self-critical thinking, all those things
Yeah.
when they go into a really high demand environment. And just like how these rules were just totally made up. I mean, we just made them up. They had a shred of maybe some Mormon church, legalism in it that I think people would be like, oh, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense, which I think is really how the Mormon church operates with its very legalistic ideas.
Okay.
I think you would find this entertaining.
Okay.
And this is Alyssa Grinfield, which I think she's actually probably the most entertaining ex-Mormon out there. You know who she is. You actually brought her up to me. The gal who's the ex-Mormon gal who, anyways, we've talked about her offline.
Okay.
She brought up the 3 craziest rules of being a Mormon missionary, which I think would be really entertaining, at least just for you, Di.
Okay.
You can never be alone. So like your missionary companion has to always be in the same room as you while you're on your mission.
What about if you go to the bathroom? Okay.
That's it. Okay. That's the only thing. But like, let's say that like, yeah, shower.
Okay.
Let's say that you like need to get deodorant, or let's say you're like super sick and like you don't want somebody like, oh, I got to go get this like whatever medication that I don't really want my companion knowing about. Like they go with you to the store. Like you're like, oh, I got to go to the store, or I got to go do this, or I got to go. Like you are 100% around this person. Okay. So that's number 1. Okay. You can't watch TV or listen to the radio or read non-church approved books, which is like every book, right? It's literally every book except for, yeah. And then there is no swimming. So you can't like swim. Like you could never jump in the ocean. So if you're serving in beautiful Kauai.
That's so arbitrary. Why no swimming?
I actually believe that it's because Joseph Smith had a revelation in DNC. I can't pull it off the top of my head, but he talked about how like evil and unpredictable the waters are, which is like super weird.
I thought you were going to say like it's public bathing and you're going to see people with too little of clothing on or something.
Which I think, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I could see that. And you're also, I think you should be able to swim. Like if I served a 2-year mission in Hawaii, I never got to go out in the ocean.
Yeah, that's,
oh my gosh. Wow. That would be crazy. So those are kind of the things she highlighted. I put it down in the description below. I actually think her content's really well done. And yeah, no criticism there. So I want to talk about, for 2 years, you have about 100-page rule book of like what to do and what not to do. Extremely legalistic, right? And then after those 2 years are over, you just pitch it. You're just like, oh, that didn't mean anything. But you tie your spirituality and you tie how connected you are to God to these extremely arbitrary rules. And you say, I am blessed by God because of how I followed them. And the opposite of that, I'm cursed by God for how I, maybe I ran to the store real quick without my companion. You would have never done that. Like, Di, I'm telling you, that would be, it's not like, oh, we're going to kind of do this. You would never leave your companion ever. So you're judged, like you personally judge yourself on how spiritual you are based on these extremely arbitrary rules. Okay. There's a really famous story by Gordon B. Hinckley, who was the prophet 2 prophets ago. And he was talking about how discouraged he was while on the mission. People were not converting, people were not joining the church. He wrote his problems to his dad, and his dad wrote a very simple 1-line letter back. And it said, "Dear Gordon," so Gordon B. Hinckley, "Dear Gordon, forget yourself and go to work." And that's kind of touted throughout the whole mission. Like, forget yourself, forget your identity, forget who you are, which I don't think is that healthy. Because now I've seen the aftermath of that, whatever it is, 15, 16 years later. And people really did forget their identity, and now they're finding it again. And I don't like, and it splits up families, and it, like, people have kind of, they're starting to find their identity again. And I think it's really troubling for them to not just try to thrive in their own identity. Instead, they're trying to be exactly obedient to what the church.
Do you feel like there's some elements of human nature in there? Okay, I'm pretty sure there is, but like, I think of the military, and conformity is a big piece of it. You know, that's a safety and protection / training readiness. I mean, I wasn't in the military, but I at least can understand the basic concept of, you know, we don't want an outlier. We don't want individual expression or personality to show up in the military. We're a united force. And I'm sure it shows up in many different religious faith systems, you know, to some degree. I'm not saying that that's good. I'm just saying, like, it feels, or even in a family, like, this is not how our family does things. We do it this way. There's sort of just a conformity element that I can hear kind of, you know, ringing true in here. It's just how far it's taken, I think, is where it becomes problematic.
Yeah, I think that, well, I guess what I want to say on this is, you can have, like, hey, this is our standard.
Right.
But you also can say, these are 19 to 21-year-old kids, like, you can also let loose and still, like, keep who you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, not 24 hours a day.
Right.
Like, even on our days off, we would have to still wear a missionary name tag.
Right.
Like, that's not a day off.
I feel like you're making an important distinction that maybe I helped set you up for, because as somebody who's just hearing this, this is new material for me. So I think it's important to understand there is a level of expectation. There is a low level, maybe conformity isn't the right word, but unity, or here's what we do and don't do. But also, you're uniquely made by God with different passions and loves, and, you know, where are you expressing yourself? So in your context, maybe a day off is the day that you can go do a hobby or something that you enjoy, so that you do keep your own personality intact.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say, you don't pick the people that you live with. It's all assigned to you. So it's like, if this person is driving you absolutely insane, you still have to be with them 24 hours a day, which is just, like, mind-blowing
for the whole 2 years, right? You don't get a new one after year 1 or something?
You get a new one you could get a new one every 6 weeks.
Oh.
But you could not. Like, you don't get the choice of that. You don't get to say, hey, I don't like this dude, and we got to mix it up here. Unless things really go off the rails, and you would kind of be seen as, like, a complainer, I would think.
Okay.
But my point in saying that is, these mission rules that you're supposed to follow, they set up how spiritual you feel you are, how connected to God you are, how obedient you are on the mission. And I just think that's all crap. For all of you listening, I was doing air quotes as I said all of those things: spiritual, obedient, right? Connected to God. None of that matters. And I think that that's really troubling for people who, want to please God. Like, I look at a lot of ex-Mormon people, and they like really at one point in their life really wanted to be in a right relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, but all this is just so stupid. Like, all of this is so arbitrary. And anyways, we're going to transition to another area of that highlights this, and that's the church's schools. BYU Utah, or BYU Provo, BYU Idaho. They also have a set of subset of rules, right?
Okay.
And again, people are held to this standard. I didn't go to those schools for long enough to maybe be fully immersed in that, but there is an honor code where you have to follow these rules. And like you said, like some of those rules are probably pretty good. Like some people are trying to have a nice, healthy experience there at the college, but there's so much weight put on them that I think it can really make people feel like they are not worthy of God, which I think is totally wrong.
Right.
And just totally messed up for someone to be like, oh yeah, Di, you're not worthy of God's presence. Sorry, and you need to follow the rules a lot better. I just think that is absolute crap.
Can you give an example of an arbitrary school rule?
Yeah, so like there's a curfew. So
Okay.
adults. And I remember being at BYU Idaho, the real church school. No, I'm just kidding. I remember being at BYU Idaho, and my girlfriend at the time came to visit me from Central Washington University. So Eastern Idaho, Central Washington. So it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive for her to come over there. And it's like 2, 3 in the morning. We're hanging out at one of my friends' houses that my wife was staying at. She couldn't stay at, she was my girlfriend at the time, but became my wife. It's like 3 in the morning. We're just sitting there talking and, just laughing or whatever. And this gal comes out and she's like, this is against the rules. You need to, and she's like yelling at it. And I'm just like, all right, like I'll leave. Like I see my girlfriend once, this is the first time I've seen her this semester. And so, and I could tell she felt like she was a warrior for the obedience police.
Did she say it like that with that deep growly voice?
Dude, she was like fired up. And I'm like, dude, it's 3 in the morning. Like you should just be sleeping, So anyways, they do room checks. They do all these things. People drink and they get in like super serious trouble, like get put on probation and all this stuff. And I'm just like, they're adults. Like you're not going to have influence on them once you start yelling at them. Once you start telling them that they're just going to be like, screw you. I can't wait to get out of this institution. Sorry if I'm being a little loose today, but they are going to say that. That's what people are going to say. They're going to be like, I'm going to be so glad to be out of here, as opposed to being like, hey, like, that's not the standard here, and
when I was that age, my reaction was, please list all the rules. Great. Now, how do I go break every single one of those?
There we go, Di. All right.
I also went to a Bible college that had really dumb rules, at least in my opinion. And I made it a point to break as many of them as possible.
Oh, there we go.
For another day.
Di the rebel. All right. So I wanted to talk about how this is doctrinal. And you know what?
How this is doctrinal? Question mark?
Yeah. Okay. You got to do the voice inflection. How this is doctrinal. And what I wanted to do is I actually have these. I'll just try to do it from memory. So this is Doctrine and Covenants, which is, as we've explained in previous episodes, for those of you who didn't grow up Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants is like Joseph Smith's sermons, let's say, where he says they are direct revelations from God.
Yep.
So in Doctrine and Covenants 130, verse 20, it says, I'm going to have to do this off the top of my head because I do not have a Doctrine and Covenants on me. but it says that there is a law irrevocably decreed in heaven. So irrevocably, meaning it cannot be taken away.
Yep.
Upon which all blessings are predicated or based. So there's this rule.
This is number 120. I feel like it should be number 1.
This is
if everything else is based on this. Whew.
Yeah, this is like, okay, so to break it into layman's terms, there are rules that you need to follow in order to get blessings.
Yeah.
And this is the second part of this. And when we obtain any blessing, you find your keys? Boom. When we obtain any blessing from God, it is by obedience to the law that it is predicated or based. So when you find your keys, it's because you helped the little old lady across the street.
Double down on the righteous works.
Righteous works, prosperity gospel. Okay. You are getting, it's a cause and effect relationship that you have with God.
Holy cow. I don't know if we've talked about this, but does that mean that anytime something bad happens as a Mormon, you would question, what did I do bad to deserve this?
Yes.
Okay. That's a rough way to live.
It's terrible. I mean,
it's very controlling.
Yeah. And you think about, so I call it spiritual gaslighting, right? You are going to say, oh my gosh, like my kids have all turned away from the church. What did I do?
Yeah.
Not what did their personal choice lead them to? Right. Like it is literally.
How does a Mormon handle the book of Job? Because the book of Job is all about that Job didn't do anything wrong, which I think is why it's even placed in the Bible. What does a Mormon do with that content?
I think that those stories in the Bible and whatever are great if they support what the church says. They're really good in that scenario.
And again, if not, you just disregard.
If not, pitch them out.
Or there's a new proclamation that goes over top of it.
Yeah. These words are more important than the previous words. Again, this is DNC 8210, which both of these are scripture mastery. I'm not just pulling some. So scripture mastery are scriptures that you're supposed to memorize as a seminary student. As a good Mormon seminary student, you're supposed to memorize all of them. DNC 8210, which I will also do from memory, is I, the Lord. This is the Lord talking here, Di. This is not Joseph Smith. Okay. I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say. But when you do not what I say, you have no promise. So the Lord is even bound. He is not even, he can't even choose anything other than to fulfill his promise that he made to you because you did exactly what he wanted you to do.
Okay.
So you have this framework of kind of a cause and effect gospel, right? The gospel of obedience, right? That's really what it is.
Yep.
If there is no like unmerited favor, if there is no, so for those of you in the Mormon world, unmerited favor is another way of saying grace, right? It is literally something that you did not earn.
Correct.
Which is the exact opposite of these verses. Like these verses are saying, you earned this. You earned having good kids. You earned having a nice house. You earned your mommy makeover. Okay. It's saying you earned those things. Okay. I shouldn't be throwing so much shade at Mormon culture, but it's saying you earned all of those things.
But you don't deserve them at all because of grace.
But the thing is unmerited favor is like, you didn't earn anything. Like everything that you have is because I just chose to give it to you, right?
It's quite an oxymoron you got going there right there.
Die. It doesn't jive. And so I wanted to bring up this teenage bride scenario as kind of my last and final point. Joseph Smith had these ideas, and I think those are reflected in his doctrine in D&C 82:10 and 130:20. How they worked and played out is in the Helen Mar Kimball scenario, which a lot of ex-Mormons are really familiar with this story. Joseph Smith at the time is, oh my gosh, I didn't put the slide in here. Joseph Smith at the time is 38 years old. Helen Mar Kimball is 14. Okay. Joseph Smith's 36. So he is older than I am at the time. Helen Mar Kimball is 14. Let's get into this quote. It says, I heard him, being Joseph Smith, teach and explain the principle of celestial marriage, meaning polygamy. I inserted that in there for those of you.
Wait, celestial marriage means polygamy? I thought it meant marriage in heaven, like after earth.
Same.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, both. Sorry. After which he told me, if you will take this step, 14-year-old girl marrying a 38-year-old man.
Wait, he's 38 or 36? You've said both.
I'm 36.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
So everyone look at this dude that's not young. That's me. And think about him marrying a 14-year-old girl. Okay. Right. Not okay. Anyways, if you will take this step, meaning, and he's already married, he already has multiple wives at this time, it will ensure your eternal salvation and exaltation. Okay, that's interesting for her. Like he's making this promise that there's nothing she can do wrong. Okay. A little problematic. And that of your father's household and all your kindred.
Oh gosh.
You find any problems with this?
Oh gosh. Go be a sex slave to a pervert and everyone in your bloodline will be saved. Go ahead and lay your life down to be a sex slave. Great.
Yeah, and this is from her own journal. This is from her own life history. This is what she said about that. This promise was so great that I willingly gave myself to purchase so glorious a reward.
I don't have anything nice to say, and my mom told me not to talk if I don't have anything nice to say.
Obedience, obedience, obedience. Right? So you and that's the theology of what people are trying to work themselves out of. Right?
I just have so many. What does a modern Mormon do with that? So did you know that when you were in your missionary training center? Did you know any of this?
No, you learn all that out after the fact, right? You are told that.
Does the average Mormon just probably have a problem with that, but then just accept it? Or does the average Mormon not ever find that out?
Well, I think that people are caught in really bad situations when they come across, and this isn't just the only bit of information, right? There's tons of information that show that what the church says it isn't true.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of people are so deep into it that making a change is terribly hard, right?
Well, that's and it's the idea of inoculation. If you continue to inject a little bit at a time, eventually you're sort of immune to the effects of it.
Yeah, and I think that's if you take this just a little bit at a time, right? Like think of the words from the song Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, right? I'm afraid of changing because I built my life around you, right? And so many members of the church built their life around this system that change is like that's my whole life. And so they go one of two ways. They say, well, that's problematic, but I still choose to believe based on these feelings that I've had, right?
Mhm.
Or they're like me, where they're like, no, this is screwed up. And I'm not going to have any part of this at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be involved in this. And I don't know what comes next. That's really who I want to speak to. Like, I'm with you on that. Like, I don't want any part of this at all. And so
I think to the average Mormon, I have so much understanding and grace for, because I mean, I know, plus I walked beside you, so it's so life shaking and would require so much courage to walk away with all the ramifications. I think it's more the upper echelon of leadership that I have a lot of problems with, because you must want to cover this information, which you can't now because of the internet, but you're complicit in it when you just pretend like it's not bad, or pretend like it's not there, or actively cover it up. So I don't know what to do with that idea in my head, except it just makes me mad.
Oh dear. Di, we don't want you to go on the ex-Mormon rage, just like so many of us have. But there are these feelings of just like, oh my gosh, like what do I and a lot of these people, like if you're talking about like obedience and wanting to follow the rules, like a lot of these people have really tried to follow the rules, have really tried to be super dogmatic and really, give their life to this thing. And then to have the people not be honest at the end, it's like, oh my gosh,
Right.
what do we do with this? So Di, I have some spiritual questions for you, because we don't leave on negative notes. That's
Right.
that's not the way that Jesus for Mormons
Help
operates.
me out here, Guy.
Yeah. So I do have a really funny one. As I sat down with your husband in the talk, and for those of you who want to go back and listen to it, Why I Hated Brandon, it's an episode that we did. Brandon is Di's husband.
Yep.
As I sat down with him, I thought that you guys were also, that your denomination was also a prosperity gospel type church. And I remember saying to Brandon, like, yeah, I know you guys are probably prosperity gospel. I said this to your husband. And he's like, no, we're not. And so I'm going to ask you this question. If somebody does all of these amazing things in their life, does that make them more or less worthy to have a relationship with God? If somebody is just the most awesome, they walk every little old lady across the street, they pray 5 hours every morning, they are whatever, they talk about how great they are all the time, I don't know. Does that make them more or less worthy of a relationship with God?
No. And notice I didn't say but. And if I drill down on that a second, I'm going to use a verse in the book of James that says, faith without works is dead. And so this is like a vicious hamster circle of, well, but I have to have works because the Bible says faith without works is dead. But I would say the best way to understand that is, the greater our closeness of relationship with God, the more the fruit will be reflective of him and God, the traits of God and the attributes of God, not in perfection ever, because we're humans and we're not perfect. The less relationship we have, the more difficult it is to have fruit that reflects him. So I think it's a hamster wheel, but first comes relationship, and we are all worthy of relationship. Or if we say it a different way, none of us deserve relationship, but we have been deemed worthy because our Creator wants relationship with us. Did I do okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. And
Okay.
I think that what's important about that is that whatever works and fruit are, like that is a different scale for each
Totally.
person, right?
Yeah.
Like if you are,
And
you
in the
know,
level of importance, they are not as important. It's who you are first. This is how I say it to people. It's always been about who you are and who you're becoming. That's what God cares about, not about what you do. What you do comes from who you are and who you're becoming. But God cares about who you are right now, exactly how you are.
yeah. And so I think that having this standard of this is like, we'll say a temple recommend, right? Like you have to be living at this certain standard to be in relationship with God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not how any of this works,
No.
right? Like you can be a drug addict looking up to heaven and find relationship right
Yep.
there. And
Yep.
and that is totally okay. You
Yep.
can be an angry ex-Mormon atheist. I'm looking to you guys out there. And you can look out to, you can say, hey, I'm a little shaky on all this stuff. And it doesn't have, you don't have to say, well, now I have to get my life right. And I have to be praying, whatever. And I have to be living the word of wisdom. And no, none of that. Like God wants to take you exactly where you are and work with that. You can have an identity that is not this rigid white shirt and tie because it doesn't care about any of that, right? You
the
can have an identity.
relationship picture for us that is just complicated because our human version of this relationship is not a good reflection is a father to a child. So a perfect version of that would be a father that never makes mistakes, loving children perfectly and unconditionally. That is how God's relationship with us is. But our human version of that, no one has a perfect father who loves unconditionally and doesn't make mistakes. So we have a hard time interpreting it through the lens of our own father and our own experience. But the relationship of the God's side of it is his love is unconditional. He doesn't have kids, humans on the earth that he says, that one's not good enough. I don't love that one. Or that one didn't perform for me like a circus monkey. And so my love is limited for that one. His love is infinite and unconditional for all. We just get to choose whether or not we want to be in that relationship of love.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point this out, and this is maybe how we will finish this episode off. It's not about an arbitrary set of rules that are made up by man.
Yeah.
That's really not what it's about. Just like the masturbation proclamation, right, was just an arbitrary thing that was made up as a prank. You could say the same thing about a lot of these legalistic rules that are just made up.
Yeah.
And they might have a shred of something in them that makes you think, oh, we need to be obedient and that is holy.
Yeah.
But they don't really connect you to God. And in a lot of ways, you look at them and you say, really? Like that's not the God that I know. And the God that I know is unmerited favor. It's grace. It's Kai, you're kind of a big idiot sometimes, and I still love you and I still think you're awesome. And let's make some course corrections. Like that's the God that I think we should be pushing towards.
Yep.
And not the God of, well, did you do all these things? Did you not drink coffee? Oh my gosh. Did that have any amount of cocoa bean, whatever it is, right?
I had a lady email me yesterday with a specific question about her performance as a Christian, essentially. And she said, I have someone telling me like, God can't forgive me for this. And I just wanted her to hear the message of grace and forgiveness. That is what is offered to us by God. And we don't perform or earn the grace or the forgiveness. We simply ask for it and receive it. And that I say the word simply, and I realize that is not simple for everybody to Some people really struggle with understanding. Some people really struggle with accepting forgiveness. They want to beat themselves or make themselves pay penance. But that we do that to ourselves. That's not God's requirement.
Definitely. Well, Di, thank you for for having this discussion today. I think it's really important to talk about, and kind of deconstruct this idea of obedience and how that makes us, how it really does not make us worthy of God's presence, of God's acceptance. And even I want all the people, even if you don't believe that, I always love this to give this very agnostic atheist, perspective. Even if you don't believe that, you should just forgive yourself. If you have any of those feelings of, oh, I'm not living the way that, the church wants me to live, or my parents want me to live, or whatever, I just want people to kind of move on past that and forgive themselves and have a lot of healing, in their walk in life.
And have hope. You didn't fail
hope.
And now it's over. You might as well quit. No, there's always, there's hope. There's a future.
Exactly. And I pray for that. I sincerely do. And thanks for joining us.
Send us your questions. I predict you're going to get questions about masturbation. I just said it.
Okay. Well, we probably will. We get a lot of questions. We're getting a lot of comments on our videos. So feel free to throw those in.
JesusForMormons@gmail.com.
JesusForMormons@gmail.com. And until next time, love you guys, and we'll see you next time.